right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Lake Fire Storm Preparedness meeting. This meeting is being recorded for the benefit of community members who are unable to make it tonight. Our public safety officials and partner agencies are going to provide a presentation, and we're going to ask that you hold your questions until the end. You'll have an opportunity to hear from County Fire Department, County Flood Control and Water Conservation District, Los Padres National Forest, National Weather Service, County Sheriff's Office, and the County Office of Emergency Management. Following their presentation, we'll go ahead and have an opportunity to answer your questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to 3rd District Supervisor Joan Hartman.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I just want to acknowledge St. Mark's and the congregation for allowing us to use this space. Sure appreciate all the agency people being here tonight, but especially you in the audience. I know a lot of people with the lake fire have been through a lot of trauma. It was a scary situation, and it was really, really ugly for a while. We didn't know what was going to happen with that fire. And sometimes when an emergency happens, you just want to turn your back on it. It's in the rear view mirror, and you want to go about your daily business and just forget about that. But we really can't, especially in our county, because we know that after fire comes the flood, and we've got to be ready for that. So we have to do business as usual, but we also have to take the time to be prepared, because if we are prepared, then we're more likely to be resilient, we're more likely to recover. I know our CEO of the county, Mona Miyasato, has declared over 30 emergencies since 2014. Maybe Kelly Hubbard will tell us how many she's been involved with since she's been here. But it's just, we live in a beautiful place, but that's the cost, is that we're caught in these cycles of fire and flood. So I really appreciate you being here. You're going to be the core of informed people that can reach out and let others know what you've learned today. It may be a La Nina year. We may not get so much rain, but unfortunately, when we do get rain, the possibility is we can get these new atmospheric rivers. So what we get comes quickly. And so we want to be ready for that. So again, thank you for being here. It really matters.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Stornetta. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of Emergency Operations for Santa Barbara County Fire Department. And I'm just going to do a brief recap real quick of the fire itself, the lake fire. It started on July 5th, and it was finally finished around August 5th. Of course, there's still some stuff occurring out there, some suppression, repair, and things like that. But that was kind of the basic date of it. So everyone knows, it was 17 years and 1 day from the Zaka fire. So which was 240,000 acres, started in the same area. So we were in unified command. So what that means, who's in command of the fire, who's the decision makers. And at that time, unified command consisted of the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, our partners from the U.S. Forest Service, our partners from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, and CAL FIRE. And the way that works is Santa Barbara County is what's called a contract county. So CAL FIRE pays us monies to cover the state responsible area. And that's what this was. We're the decision makers. We have CAL FIRE in here to support us, but it is local decisions from here that make all the changes with the Forest Service and the Sheriff's Department. So the final acreage was 38,000 acres. So the 1993 Murray fire that was also in this general area, I was there as well, was 42,000 acres. So I think we did a little better on this one. But for that initial day, we knew that this thing, I was out there within 30 minutes with Chief Gurwey and Chief Scott from the U.S. Forest Service. It started right around Zaka Lake there. From the Zaka fire and the Murray fire, and knowing our fire history in the area, because there is a lot of fire history, and I know the community here is well aware of that, so I'm probably just recapping stuff you already know. We knew that this was probably going to be something very significant. We were in red flag at the time. The relative humidities for the The air was very low. We had the winds. The fuels were decadent, old stage with a lot of growth. So we knew that as much as we tried putting suppression efforts on it, it was probably going to be very difficult. And right off the bat, we had some major fire growth. So in the end, it cost about $44 million. We had 128 different fire agencies from across the state on the fire. Law enforcement, there was 4 different agencies here. 35 permanently assigned law enforcement throughout the fire, but that doesn't count the 3,000 plus hours of CHP and Sheriff's Department doing traffic control points. On the incident itself, there was 14 injuries. 11 of those were taken to hospitals because they were significant, and 2 of those were taken to burn centers with significant burns. So there was a lot of personnel, a lot of things happening when you have 3,300 personnel on the fire itself. Anyways, our big thing just for our hazards and concerns, and you'll hear this coming up here from the different presenters, but our hazards and concerns are what happened out there, but what's going to happen next. And if there's any additional information you guys need about water safety and things like that, then we want to make sure we communicate that and talk to you about that. We'll be putting out some public service announcements later. Unfortunately, last year with a big rain year, we had 2 major rescues right here in the San Ynez River where we had to put boats in the water and personnel. And that is always a concern of ours. So water safety is a big thing. So make sure, and I know that Kelly's going to talk about some of this as well, but make sure you hit us at the table afterwards. We can talk more about that. And again, we'll put out some messages for that as well. Our priorities for after the incident, during the incident, prior are always these: life safety, property conservation, and the environment. We want you guys to be safe. So that's why all the evacuations occurred. That's why we pull the plug early. That's why I know Kelly's going to talk about this later too, is we want you guys to be cognizant of what's going on around you. And as those rivers and streams do and change stuff and debris may occur, we want you guys to pay attention to that.
Good afternoon, Ben Gray. I'm the District Ranger for the Santa Lucia Ranger District for the Los Padres National Forest. Most of this fire was on the Santa Lucia Ranger District and a little bit on the Santa Barbara District as well. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about the mitigation that we're doing because, of course, when a fire comes through, it changes the landscape in certain ways. And Anthony already mentioned it a little bit. We're worried about debris flows and runoff. Typically during a fire event, after you have the fire controlled and contained, you start to do what they call suppression repair to put back what the landscape that you've already worked on some, to make sure that the damage to the landscape doesn't get any worse over time. During our lake fire, we had a lot of other fires happening in California, like the park fire around Chico that blew up to 400,000 acres or so. So we didn't have the means to do it at that time with all the other fire emergencies. We'll be starting suppression repair on October 15th. Which means that we go back and we fill in some of those dozer lines and we make sure that the work that we did doesn't cause more erosion and more problems. So that process will be going on very soon. We're also working on something concurrently, what we call BEAR, Burned Area Emergency Response. And this is to help further rehabilitate that landscape to make sure that the changes to the hydrologic profile of the soil don't cause for any more problems to our roadways and also to the health and safety of the people that we have visiting with us. So we do have an emergency closure in place, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I think, with our patrol captain. But these are some efforts that we're working on now that we can get into a little bit more detail later.
All right. As the district ranger, Ben mentioned, it's a joint effort. It's teamwork out there, so suppression repair. And he mentioned there was different areas of the fire. So as you see down here, it actually breaks it down because we were in unified command. We broke the fire into a north zone and south zone. And it was mostly trying to break out whose direct protection area it was. Was it state protection area or was it federal? So as you look down here, 38,653 acres, which was 63%, was the SRA or was FRA. And then the state had 38%. So the majority of it was in the federal lands. So this is important when we get to suppression repair. So next slide, please. Here's kind of a map of it. And what I just want to illustrate here is, the size and the complexity of this. You can see that it's really long like this. And what this is, when you see something long and extended like this, then it's usually either topographic or wind-driven. So that's what it was. The first night, this was a wind-driven fire. It all started around Zaca Lake there, and that first night, the wind pushed it up to the east or the west here. So north orientation, south orientation here. So it pushed it all the way up to the northwest up there. as this thing, and what was unique about this, and I didn't mention earlier, was at night, and I know Russell and Mary, the Chamberlains that live up there, know the weather patterns. So even though during the day was red flag never went away at night. Kind of like our front country sometimes get those sundowner effects. That's exactly what happened up here on the fire. So the first night we had 90 degrees with 8% relative humidity on the first night. That was at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's the night it turned around and came back to the east here and came back down. So that's how it grew so fast. It was old decadent fuels, but also the winds that were on it as well. Next slide. So as Ben mentioned, there's suppression repair. For the state areas out there, we went out there and regraded the roads. We fixed culverts, opened pipelines so that when the water does flow, that we make sure that everything's open. Now, we do work with biologists, archaeologists, and things like that to make sure we don't disturb any sensitive areas. So we have all those part of the incident command team that go out with us. We looked at drainage areas, slope. We pulled back some brush in areas where the brush need to be pulled back for erosion. And then there was fencing because there's a lot of cattle. If you look around that south side there's a lot of cattle ranches, same thing as the Chamberlain side over on the north side. So that was what suppression repair for the scope of us consisted of. I think that's it. And just here's a couple of photos of regrading the roads out there, taking down the berms, putting in some water bars so the water hits the water bars and diverts instead of washing out big areas all at once. And these are some of our fire suppression personnel up on top, just developing plans for putting some of the brush back on the roads.
Hi, good evening. I'm Matt Griffin, engineering manager for the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. So burned watersheds do have more runoff and debris generated than unburned watersheds when it rains. And that's primarily due because there's less vegetation to hold and retain, that water. Also, below the loose burned soil and vegetation, the fire creates a hydrophobic layer, which is kind of a waxy layer that sort of prevents water from infiltrating and absorbing down into the soil. So that water, instead of absorbing in, it runs off much more quickly than normal. So for the lake fire, we do anticipate, if certain rainfall thresholds are met, we do anticipate the potential for debris flows. Mostly that'll occur within the burn scar or immediately, downstream of the burn scar. It's unlikely that these debris flows, which typically are, defined with big rock, dangerous, it's unlikely that those types of debris flows will reach Highway 246 or Highway 101 if you're concerned about Zaca Creek. But there is, if certain rainfall thresholds are met, we do expect increased flood risk for all of the creeks, south of the mountain range. And also the floaty woody debris that comes off the fire burn scar. We do expect that to be significant also if certain rainfall thresholds are met. So this is a picture of Highway 246 at Alamo Pintado Road in 1998. This is the flood of record for Alamo Pintado Creek, 3,700 cubic feet per second, which is the equivalent of a 50 to 100 year annual recurrence interval. I know this same intersection flooded in 2023. That flow had about a 25-year annual recurrence interval. To give you a rough idea of flooding impacts that might occur due to the burn scar, if we get a storm with a 2 to 5 year annual recurrence interval, there's a chance that we might get a reoccurrence similar to the 2023 flood event. I don't want to get too precise or accurate. There's a lot of variables here, but the increase is real. If you have specific areas of concern, probably our best tool to identify flood risk are the FEMA special flood hazard mapping. Outside in the far back, there's handouts that you can grab It has links to a couple resources for you to find online versions of those maps. So this is a picture of the burn scar overlaid on the associated watersheds. 5 major watersheds on the south side of the mountain range: Zaca Creek, Alamo Pintado, Santa Aguida, Happy Canyon, and Kachuma Creek. The flood control district has already started doing protective measures. Last month, we did expanded amount of vegetation removal within Alamo Pintado Creek from Highway 154 to just south of Highway 246. And we are working with our federal partners, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to implement 3 other emergency protective measures. 2 debris racks, one located on Alamo Pintado Creek, just upstream of Midland School, and one on the Chamberlain Ranch, just downstream of the confluence with Sycamore Canyon Creek. And we are focusing our efforts on Alamo Pintado Creek because that has the most urbanization and the most downstream risk. There is one other emergency protective measure identified on the map here. That is a potential flood barrier at the Nielsen Shopping Center. The intent of that is to prevent or at least mitigate the flooding at that intersection that we saw in 2023. So flood protection and flood prevention is a shared responsibility. You as residents and property owners need to protect yourselves. Also on the table in the back, there's a flood preparation and safety handout. This map shows sandbag stations that will be available to the public. These will be up and running by November 1st. The one in Buellton is typically at Fire Station 31, but I believe due to construction that is temporarily relocated to 761 McMurray Road. And all this information is on our flood control website. That'll be there year round, or not year round, but it'll be there for the duration of the winter. And then we will have another temporary sandbag station at Sunnyfield Park in Solvang, and that one will probably have a limited amount of supply, so that one will be available while supplies last. If you live next to a creek or you think you might be in a flood-prone area and you don't have flood insurance, I would recommend that you consider purchasing flood insurance. There's a handout for that also in the table in the far back. One caveat is the flood insurance needs to be active for 30 days before it becomes effective. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of the county's real-time rainfall, river stream, and reservoir data. It's a great resource. You can come on here and look at a variety of rain gauges. We have a stream gauge on Alamo Pintado Creek. We have lake levels. It's the most widely used website in the county. So if you're interested or if you want to just be in tune with what's going on around you, this is probably the website to start with. It does have a couple links, one of them to the National Weather Service, where you can probably find forecast information. And also there's a link to the county hydrology webpage, which has several publicly accessible cameras. We intend to have a camera in place at one of our emergency protective debris rack projects, sometime before December. I mentioned the NRCS previously, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They are holding a webinar tomorrow. There's a handout for that also in the back. This webinar is going to focus on private property owners and land users regarding post-fire restoration and protection, erosion control, sediment control, debris clearance. So if that's of interest to you, I'd recommend checking out that webinar. And the NRCS has also indicated that if you're a private landowner, they can come out to your ranch or your property and do a site investigation and give you advice. So if you attend that webinar tomorrow, I'm sure you'll have the ability to hook up with the NRCS there and ask them for that service. So that concludes my presentation. I think next up is Jamie with the National Weather Service.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie. I'm with the National Weather Service. Our office is down in Oxnard, and our forecast covers San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Los Angeles County. So our office is providing the forecast for your area. You can go to the next slide. So I wanted to touch a little bit about what we anticipate this winter to be like. This winter, we are expecting cooler than normal temperatures out on the sea surface temperatures out along the equator, so as we get cooler water out on the ocean out there, that equates to what we call a La Nina. So people have heard El Nino before. El Nino means the waters along the equator are warmer than normal. This year, we're going to be a little bit cooler than normal. So in this graphic, you see a bunch of lines here that are going, down lower. Anything down towards this lower side is cooler than normal, which is La Nina. So the majority of these models are projecting that it's going to be cooler than normal. So what does that mean for Santa Barbara County and the Lake Fire when we talk about La Nina? So next slide. So during a La Nina, the jet stream tends to get shifted a little bit further north, and then we get storms in the wetter part of the country is the northern part of the country, where the southern part of the country tends to be drier and warmer. So what that means for Southern California and Santa Barbara County is the trend in a La Nina tends to be more on the drier side. It doesn't mean it's always going to be dry, but the trend is for generally drier than normal conditions in the winter. One caveat with that, even though we talk about La Nina and potentially being drier than normal, we're still going to get some storms this winter. Even one or two storms can cause flooding. So don't let your guard down when we say that the overall season might be below normal or below average rainfall. There's still going to be storms that could cause flooding this winter. So you still need to be prepared, regardless of El Nino, La Nina, whatever we say. But the overall trend in a La Nina is that the whole season tends to be lower than normal, but we're still going to get storms. Okay, next slide. I have on this slide, I have the red outline. We've already seen that. That's the lake burn area perimeter. We at the National Weather Service, we monitor rainfall over the burn area during the winter, and we use some rainfall thresholds that would cause us, if we see those thresholds met from the rainfall, that would prompt us to issue some different products from our office. It could be a flash flood watch or a flash flood warning, and I'm going to explain those on another slide so that you understand what those means. But I just wanted to give some of these thresholds that we're going to be using this year. So if we see 3,500, so 0.35 inches in 15 minutes, that's one of our thresholds. That would prompt us to most likely issue a flash flood warning for flash flooding and debris flows from the burn area. A half an inch in 30 minutes, 0.7 in 1 hour. So those are typically rain rates that we see every year. That's like a 1-year recurrence interval rainfall. So I can almost assure you that we're going to probably see those kind of rain rates during storms this year. So if we do see those kind of rainfall rates on the burn area, we will most likely be issuing some sort of flash flood watch or warning product from our office. Okay, next slide. So what can we expect if we get moderate to heavy rain on the burn area. A couple things can happen. We can get flash flooding. Flash flooding generally is more water content, and when it hits, as water flows downhill, if it hits a change in slope, it's going to continue going. That means it's more water. It's a lot of water. So we could see flash flooding, and when we talk about flash flooding, we're talking about more of what's in this picture, more of water. The other type of impact we can have from a burn area is called a debris flow. And I have another slide where I'll talk more about what a debris flow is. So let's go to the next slide. So a debris flow tends to be more made up of more rocks, mud, than water. It's going to be, thicker, more like almost like concrete in a sense, flowing down. And it can, when you get a debris flow, you can have rocks that are entrained in this mud, and then it can cause quite a bit of scouring of the channel, but it also, if it comes out of the channel, it can cause quite a bit of damage to property if that were to happen. This picture down here, I know it's hard to see, it's pretty small. That was the Montecito debris flow that happened several years ago. That's like one of the worst case scenarios that I've ever seen as far as debris flow. But that is the potential that could occur from a burn area if we get heavy rainfall. So next slide. Okay, so from the National Weather Service, you'll probably hear this winter, you'll hear a couple different products that we would issue. One would be a flash flood watch. So we can issue a flash flood watch for flash flooding and debris flows from the lake burn area. If you see or hear a flash flood watch from the National Weather Service, that means, so like this taco picture here, the ingredients are there in that storm. We see that the storm could potentially have rain rates that meet those flash flooding and debris flow thresholds, but it's still out in the future. It's 12, 24 hours away. So that's what a watch means. A watch means the storm is coming, the ingredients might be there, but the storm's not here yet. So be prepared. That's the time, if we issue a flash flood watch, that's a good time to take your necessary precautions. Don't wait until the flooding's already occurring if it's going to occur. The other thing you can hear from the National Weather Service is a flash flood warning. So we can issue a flash flood warning for flash flooding and debris flows. A flash flood warning means it's happening or it's going to be happening very soon. So the watch means the ingredients are there. It could be coming. A warning means it's happening or it will happen very shortly. So that's why I say do your preparations when you hear the flash flood watch. Don't wait for the warning, because the warning we could have 30 minutes of lead time. We could have 0 minutes of lead time on a warning. So prepare earlier than later. Okay, next. One way to get information from the National Weather Service to hear about what our forecast is, any of the products that we might be issuing is weather.gov/Los Angeles. That takes you to our homepage, which has all kinds of information on there about weather forecasts, any of the watch warnings, lots of information there. If you guys have questions, there's 2 other folks here from the National Weather Service. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. And we have some handouts out here on the table too. So please stop by and pick anything up that you might want. Okay, next slide. A couple of ways that if we issue these watch or warning products, a couple of ways that you might get those. One of the ways is called a wireless emergency alert through your phone. They are on by default on your phone unless you turn it off on newer phones. So older phones might not have it, but newer phones, it's set up in your phone by default, and you would have to actually go in there and turn it off if you don't want it. So I don't know if you've ever had your phone like all of a sudden start buzzing. It's an Amber Alert, or maybe it was a flash flood warning that you were in that area. That's coming from us at the National Weather Service. So that's one way you might be alerted to some sort of product that we're issuing for potentially for that lake burn area. Another way to get our information is a NOAA weather radio. There you can purchase these at like Radio Shack or some of these different stores that sell equipment or like radio equipment like that. But there's a NOAA weather radio that's set to the frequency that when we issue those warnings, it'll go through a transmitter up in the area, and then you can get it through the NOAA weather radio. So that's another way that you could get information. And I don't know the exact cost of those. Maybe around $40 cheaper. So even cheaper than $40 if you're interested in NOAA weather radio. Okay, next slide. Oh, that was it.
I'll stand over here because I'm pretty short. I'll disappear. My name is Blanca Rosas. I'm the patrol captain here for Los Padres. And you already met Ben. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the forest closures. What do we look at whenever we're going to issue a forest closure order? And one of the main priorities for Los Padres and for our agency is to provide for public safety. So if we know that there's a potential weather watch warning, all of the stuff that they had already talked about, our partners, we actually talk with them as well to try to coordinate what we can do to help out. Ben also spoke a little bit about our restoration and suppression repair, and that's starting a little late because of all the different fires that we've been dealing with throughout California and our minimal personnel. But with that, there's the possibility of continuing with this forest closure. There is a map on the next slide. This is the current post-lake fire closure area. And as you can see, it has the different trails as well as the day use areas and the picnic day use areas that have been impacted and burned. So we want to make sure that we do our restoration and our work in order for them to be open to the public. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So I had mentioned bear earlier. So let me just back up just a little bit. I had talked about suppression repair, which is a very similar thing that Anthony was talking about, water bars and dozer lines, things like that. But then I moved and talked about bear a little bit. And bear actually ties in with this closure pretty directly. Some of the things that happen on the fire, of course, is when we lose a facility, when a man-made object burns, it often leaves some hazardous material behind. Signs, things like that, infrastructure. And we're also concerned, as Blanca said, about health and safety. So what our bear effort does is we're doing a few things like cleaning up burned hazmat to make sure it's not as danger to the public, removing hazard trees that have been burned by fire that now pose a threat. We have a saying that a hazard tree is a tree that has a defect, like damage, and a target. So if it's a weak tree sitting over a picnic table, we want to get that out of there before people go back in. We also have some other concerns. Actually, can we go to the next slide, please? We talked a little bit about water already, but our concerns really have a lot to do with water. So one of our values is really public access. We want to make sure that people can go up and enjoy Figueroa Mountain and those surrounding areas as much as possible. The things that are closed right now are mostly, as Blanca said, a few picnic sites, the Figueroa campground, and a handful of trails. And those are, again, for the hazmat and the burned trees. However, we intend, based on anticipated weather, which, by the way, we get those weather reports from NOAA, from National Weather Service, in the office, and we monitor those. When those come up and we're looking at an event that can be hazardous to people, either creating debris flow or flash floods, we plan to do what we call conditional closures, which means is we're going to go up and sweep those areas with our staff to make sure nobody's camping in a place that might be subject to a flash flood. We're going to close those roads until the danger passes. And the reason why we're doing that is that this is what you call I'm sorry, Blanca. Okay. This is called a soil burn severity map. And this is, of course, the lake fire footprint. These green areas didn't burn very much. And that just means that fire went through there, left a lot of vegetation on the ground. When you get into these red and yellow areas, that means the fire burned more intensely and for longer. And when that happens, water tends to come off that soil very quickly. It no longer absorbs the water, and water slides down very quickly. Would you go to the next map, please? This is a little hard to see here, but this is a debris flow map. So when you have that burned soil on a slope, then you start to get worried about that debris flow. And so these red areas are areas that we think is a high potential, and the yellow area and the orange areas as well, a high potential for debris flow. And what can happen then is that water and that ash and the dead wood, rocks, that can all come down on a road or a trail. We want to make sure that people aren't there during that time. So that's why we're going to be going into those conditional closures. Now, some of those campgrounds, we're going to be having seasonal closures on those when we know that water and that weather is going to be more permanent fixture of the environment. We're not quite there yet, but right now we're just doing conditional closures based on the anticipated weather forecast. Did I cover everything else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Jason Grossini, Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office. I'm the North County Operations Division Commander, and I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about emergency protective actions, what they are, and a little bit about why we do them. Next slide. One thing you all need to know is these decisions are made by not just us. It's not a singular decision. This is by a group of people who make these decisions. And the agencies include our fire partners, the law partners, county OEM, city OESs, National Weather Service, other leadership from the county, could be the CHP and any other relevant party, depending on what the disaster is. Partners may vary, but the priority remains the same. It's the protection of life, safety, property, conservation, and environment. As far as the actions themselves, I'm sure you're all very familiar with these. Unfortunately, you've all lived through these. The evacuation warning, obviously that hazard's in place. It's in your area. It poses a potential threat to life and or property. A good thing to know about the evacuation warning is if you're a person with disabilities or other needs, or anybody that just needs some extra time, that is a good time to leave. If you need the time, that is a good time to leave. People with large animals, same thing. We know, and we work with people, traders are gonna be going in and out, trader and animals. That's a good time to get started and get things moving. I mean, we really appreciate people doing it at that point, not waiting till we get here. Go to the evacuation order, same thing, hazard in the area and poses an immediate threat. That's when the order is given, immediate threat to life. Anyone in the area should leave now, do not wait. Then obviously look for your information, readysbc.org, any other before mentioned ways to gather information is where you'll be getting that info. One more slide. And then last, we have the shelter in place. Shelter in place means there's a hazard in the area again, poses a potential threat, life and or property, shelter in place, used for areas where people have not evacuated, or it may be used without any evacuation warnings or orders beforehand. So this could be an immediate thing. And one thing you need to know about the shelter in place, you want to get to the most inner portion of your residence or barn or wherever it may be, and to the highest point possible. If you are outside at the time a shelter in place order is issued, immediately seek shelter and anticipate sheltering until further notice. A good note for that is have that that little bag and or cupboard or cabinet where you have some extra supplies, water, the food supplies that last a long time. Just make sure you have those things readily available. And that's the emergency protective actions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Hubbard. I'm the director for the Office of Emergency Management. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you're going to get this information when a storm does come into the community. So go ahead. So first of all, when we do what we call alert and warning, this is when we're notifying you that there's an actual protective action that we want you to take, okay? It's not just public information. It's when we talk about alert and warning, we're talking about actions we want the community to take. And our goals when we do that is to protect lives and property, of course, but time is of the essence. So Jamie earlier mentioned that sometimes that those weather notices may have 0 to 20 minutes, right? And so we might not always have a lot of time to get this alert out to you. So one of the key concepts is we're trying to get alerts to you, but if you ever feel unsafe, don't wait for us to give you that information. Take the actions that you feel that you need to take. But we're going to communicate protective actions, and we're going to use multiple pathways, and I'm going to talk about those pathways. Also, when we talk about alerting objectives, because I know we have some community members who might be outside of the immediate burn scar area. We might have some community members that are further down the hill or down some of the riverways. Our immediate objectives are going to be for those who are most immediately impacted. So we're going to first work on messaging for those people who are in that immediate burn scar area. And so that's when we talk about, when we talk about the order, we're going to first focus on those people. And then there might be some people who are further down or away from that burn scar or down the river, and maybe they only need a warning or just information about what might be occurring. So we're going to do those in order of risk. Okay, so we're going to first do that order, or those people who are most immediately impacted, and then we'll work our way through those additional alerts as needed. So realize that someone who might be downriver, you might get your information a little bit later or a little bit longer as we work through that process. All right, one of my primary tools and my team's tools, and I have a couple of them here with me here today, is Ready SBC Alerts. And those you have to register for. We cannot auto-register you. We do have things like if you have landlines, if you still have landlines, we might have those from 911 services, but we really do ask for you guys to register. And when you register, there's a couple concepts here. One, you can register multiple addresses, up to 5. So you might want to register your own home, where you work, maybe a mother or father who you might be concerned with, or a son or someone who lives in another house. You must register at least one contact method. So you can't just go in, we've had people do this, put in your name and your address and then not provide us a phone number or an email, okay? So you have to have one contact method and an address. And then you can have several contact methods. You can register for text messages, phone calls, emails. I recommend registering for as many as you're willing to receive, because you just don't know which one's going to work in that moment. When we talk about using all of our tools, I want to be able to use as many tools as I can to let you know that there's a life safety risk. I'm going to make a couple notes about your address. We found out during the lake fire that we had some residents who may not have gotten registrations. And one of the key notes that we looked back at was how you write in your address. So you know when you purchase something online and it says, and it wants to correct your address, take the correction, okay? Don't abbreviate Figueroa Mountain as FIGMTN. It won't map properly in our system, okay? So the whole system is based on geographic location. And so if it's saying, is this the right address? As long as it's not correcting to something weird, not correct, right? But if it's saying, hey, let's make this minor modification in what you put in there, take that correction. It's more than likely going to help make sure that that is mapping correctly. Additionally, I know some of your properties are in remote areas or maybe really large properties. When you're going through that process and you look at the screen, it's actually a map. And you can move the little dot. It's kind of like moving a dot on Google Maps. Don't do this unless you really want it to move, because our alerts are based on me drawing a circle around all those dots in the system. But when you map your address and your property or your house is actually all the way back down some dirt road that Google or the mapping system that we're using doesn't show, you can move that dot over. Just recognize that where we draw our circle is based on where that dot ends up, okay? Go ahead. This is a little small for you guys to look at, but I'm going to explain something here. The ones on the top, this is what I call my push notifications. This is where if you're registered or these are ways that I can push information out to you, Okay, I can use Ready SBC if you're registered. I can use the wireless emergency alerts that Jamie mentioned earlier. We can use EAS, the ones that go through your TV or your radio. The ones on the bottom are what I would call your pull methods. So these are the ones that you guys can go to actively, right? You can call 211. You can call our call center if it's open. You can go to websites or social media sites. So these are all your different tools, and we're going to try to put information on every single one of these as quickly as we can. Okay, big list of different websites, social media accounts. We will have this up again at the very end so that you can take a picture of it. So don't try to hurry up and write it all down. We also have a lot of these up on our website as well. Okay, a little bit about individual preparedness and a couple things, apologies, that I realized I didn't have on here. So a couple of our speakers referred to a couple reports. You might have heard WORT or BEAR report. These are reports done by our state and federal partners about the burn scar. What is the risk for flood or debris flow? Those reports are available at Ready SBC. So if you go to readysbc.org and you go to Lake Fire Recovery, those reports are available. They have more details, a lot of science, so be ready. A lot of details and technicalities in there. But if you're someone who'd like to understand those a little bit more, I'd encourage you to look at those. They do also have some specific properties identified that have some higher risk. We've talked to most of those properties directly, if not all of them. And so if you're wondering and you haven't heard from us, you're probably not one of those ones that had a little bit higher of a risk identified. And the reports make recommendations on different things you can do to improve protections at your property, along with, for instance, that seminar that's tomorrow. Additionally, Cal OES has this great link. This is the California Office of Emergency Services. They have where you can put in your address and you can find out all of the different hazards that your address might be associated with, whether you're in a fire zone, a flood zone. We do have the flood maps on our website as well. I think one of the most important things about preparedness is being aware of your risk so that you understand what you need to be prepared for. Being prepared, there's lots of information on Ready SBC. Having an emergency plan, having a communications plan, having an emergency kit, all of those things. One of the ones that I love the most and I think this community is really good at is knowing your neighbor. Knowing who's next to you and who's going to need help, who might need that additional push or knock, or who might need assistance. I use the example, my daughter was a latchkey kid. I don't think they use that term anymore, but she was a latchkey kid. She was at home in the mornings and afternoons, and my neighbors knew it. And they knew that if something happened that they needed to help me out and that they would go and take care of her and help her get out if needed, right? So we know we have those neighbors. They might be elderly. They might be neighbors who have access or functional needs. They might have younger children. So please, part of your preparedness, check in on those neighbors, know how you're going to help out if that might be needed. Lots of other resources on our website, as I mentioned. All right, in that storm, we talked about evacuation warnings and orders, and I know that can get confusing. I think the primary thing is to make sure you've prepared your home and to leave early if you feel like there's a risk to your home. Once it starts raining is not the time to leave, right? And so we will try to help provide guidance on those emergency protective actions as we get information from National Weather Service. But we're also know we have a lot of microclimates. And so pay attention to what's happening around you, listen, sign up for those alerts, and then take action before it rains, hopefully. And then stay informed. And again, check in with those neighbors as that storm continues. And I'm just going to emphasize one big component. I know we talked a lot about it. We talked about the flood risk. We talked about debris flow risk. The major risk identified in these reports was flood risk. There is some debris flow risk, but the major one is flood risk. And we're really concerned about how far that might come down our river and waterways. So please just really pay attention this coming season, even if it is a La Nina and just a few storms. We're really concerned about that, and we want to make sure everyone's aware and taking those precautions. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie to help facilitate Q&A.
Okay, thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you to our community members. Now is your opportunity to ask your questions, and we have a couple different ways for you to do that. Stacy with Office of Emergency Management has a mic, and so if you raise your hand, she'd be happy to go around and give you that mic. If you need a little bit more time, or perhaps you want one of us to read your questions, we also have pen and paper. You can write your question down, give it back to Stacy, and we'll make sure that that question is read as well. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm Cheryl Morris. I live on Figueroa Mountain. We're above Los Padres National Forest Ranger Station. We are in those microclimates. And our biggest concern is the fact that the county has never maintained the road from Midland School to the forest boundary. There are potholes, there is overgrowth, and all you do is bring leftover blacktop from some other job that you're doing, and right now the road is terrible. This has been going on for 30 years. And every time there's been a fire and people come up that road, whether it's Caterpillars, fire trucks, nobody takes care of that road from the bridge to the forest line. The other is right now, in addition to the creek, and you're expecting a serious mud flow, which I said from the very beginning when that fire burned through there, nobody has bothered to look at the road. It's burned on both sides of the road, on the Sedgwick side, on the county side, the forest side, all the way over the top. There are dead pine trees along the edge of the road that are standing there and are going to be subject to coming down if it rains any amount. The other subject is going to be dirt and debris, which we saw 3 years ago when we had mudslides along that road. And it wasn't because of the county road that cleaned them up. It's because I had somebody coming up to do work on my property, and he cleared those out of the road. Rocks come down in the same places every single year. And the road pavement is what you call 1 inch thick of blacktop. Now, I don't begrudge the Chamberlains and the road from Midland School down past their property because it's really nice to drive. I don't begrudge them the fact that they can get their trees trimmed along the road that the county does for 3 full days. But we cannot get anything above the bridge taken care of. Absolutely nothing. When it has rained and the water always goes along the edge of the road and goes the same place, the county purchased a pickup with a plow on the front. Does absolutely nothing because they're not directing the water to the right side. Now there's no vegetation along the road coming up. Absolutely no vegetation as you come up on the left-hand side. You look down and that is straight down. Absolutely straight down. That does not include from what we call Grass Mountain all the way down that whole area. It is all burned and it goes straight down that draw. That does not include the water that runs down the road and is not taken care of. So to us, you are not fulfilling your commitments to us on Figueroa Mountain. I have one resident who will be 90 years old the end of this month. He is in a wheelchair most of the time. I have other people who are 67 and older. We are not a young community, and so we would expect some consideration of how you treat us as residents within the Los Padres National Forest. The Forest Service road is excellent as far as I'm concerned. Always has been, always will. There will be areas above Figueroa Campground that will slide down in the road simply because there is nothing to stop the rain. Absolutely nothing. We will have slides that we did not expect. And so for us, we only have one way we can, well, actually we have two. One is to go down Figueroa Mountain Road, and the other is to go all the way around through Happy Canyon. And we know what happened there 2 years ago, because he had to close the road. We know what happened on Figueroa Mountain Road on this side. The county did nothing other than put a close sign up, and they did not do the work that they should have been doing. I understand there are other people who have more money and more pull in getting things done than what we do. And it's very frustrating to have people come up who think we are having a super bloom, parking along the side of the road that is only fit for one car. It would be nice if the county talked to Midland School or whoever is responsible for that property now to open their field up and allow people to park in there when it's wildflower season. The other is, what are you going to do when we get snow? I don't see any county personnel coming up except to check where the water would run along the edge of the road. That's it. That's all they come up with a saw and a shovel to clean that. Or they bring up bags of blacktop to fill periodically those minor holes that they can fill. It has been very frustrating for years. You all ignore us. And we've had people to check how many cars are going on various roads. And when does the county put those out? October. Not April, not March, not May, April, or in October, when there is no traffic. So for us, it is very frustrating. So I'm not even asking you a question, I'm just telling you where the frustration lies. And we were not on the ready alert, and I did talk to Miss Hubbard, and I had to do it when we had been evacuated by then. I notified all of our residents that they had to leave. The sheriff's department did not come up until later and told one of our residents to leave. And thank God he did, because the trailer he had burned up. Our whole property was burned to the ground. We have trees that are standing, and fortunately, none of our homes were affected. So, as far as I'm concerned, the county has not been doing its job for those residents above Midland School. You can do control burns behind Midland School. You can do control burns on the Chamberlain Ranch. But you do not consider anything that is happening above that. You consider Santa Barbara an important place. You consider Solvang an important place. You consider Lompoc an important place. But you do not consider Figueroa Mountain Road an important place. If I had that many people coming up and driving their trucks in your front yard, you would be pissed. I've seen what people have done. And we've only lived on that mountain since 1963. I've seen it all. My family's seen it all. We used to run cattle on the forest. So for the county to say they're going to do something for us, personally, I call it BS. Because you have not contacted us, you have not spoken to us, and when I tried to make my concerns known, trying to get to our property during the fire, I was ignored. I was ignored by the Forest Service. I was ignored by the Sheriff's Department. I was ignored by your group where you had to call. If I was not in agriculture, I couldn't get through. My neighbor couldn't get through to go up and water her horses. So that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
We appreciate your comment, and just so everybody knows, we will have our public safety officials around after the Q&A session in case you do have individual questions, concerns, want to talk to them further. Other questions?
Good evening, Ryan Smith. I'm a resident of the Woodstock area. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to the public safety agencies, to the county, roads, floods, OEM, all those folks. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that the public doesn't see. So thank you guys. Thank you for all the late nights. Obviously, the fire up here, this terrain was extremely difficult, very hard fire to work. So thank you guys for everything that you did, and you had it running down both sides in two separate geographic portions of our county. So there's a lot of challenges there. So thank you guys. It was very much appreciated. And the one thing that I want to say is several years prior, the county and the sheriff and the fire department had the forethought to say, hey, we should have an aviation unit and we should be able to fight fires at night. That was a key component of keeping a good portion of the northeastern portion of the Santa Ynez Valley safe during this specific fire. And so, again, thank you guys for that. Thank you for those crews being out there. Flying is inherently dangerous. Anytime you fly at night, that risk expands exponentially. What I would like to say, Madam Supervisor, with you here, and I'm going to do a shameless plug right now for our public safety personnel, is that we do have one newer helicopter, but we have multiple that are extremely well maintained, but they're 60 years old. Some of those helicopters flew in Vietnam, and we're asking our sheriff deputies and our firefighters to go out in extremely dangerous weather conditions at night, and wind and inclement weather and smoke, and do that. I understand that we're in an economic downturn, and I understand that there's competing for funds across the county, and there's so many important projects, but I think we need to look at giving that specific unit some funding, not specifically for the sheriff, not specifically for the fire department, but for the county as a whole. There's so much that they do on the firefighting side, night rescues. And so I would just ask that if we can look at that. I know that there's many citizens and organizations that have said, hey, if the county is willing to come up with some money, there's private donors that are willing to open their paychecks for that as well. So, or excuse me, their checkbooks for that as well. So I would just ask that if we could take a look at that. Personally, I know it's a little off topic for here, but it relates to what we saw during that fire. And collectively, there's several $1 billion in assets just on this portion of the valley between agriculture, residential, commercial. And specifically, as that fire came down and started to burn into Sedgwick, there were several nights where the only helicopter that was flying was the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. And for the edification of the folks in this room, if you're not aware, there's only a couple agencies in the state of California that can actually fly at night for firefighting operations. So it's not that we can just go get it from somewhere. There's only a couple entities that we can go pull from throughout the state. And there is a good system in place to do that, but it's a very limited resource. So I would just ask that if we could take a look at that, in the coming months and see if we can give them proper funding to get some current aircraft. I'll close it on this. If we called 911 right now and a police car showed up and it was 60 years old, or a fire truck showed up and it was 60 years old, people would say, hey, how do we get these folks new equipment? And I know that a helicopter is much more expensive than a fire truck and a police car, but it's an asset that's extremely advantageous to the safety of our community and to the safety of our folks that we're asking to go out and do these things in the middle of the night. So with that, again, thank you all. Thank you for the support from the district. And Kelly, your shop, you guys did an amazing job with communicating with the community. So thank all of you.
Other questions? Okay. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. As I mentioned, there it is. For anyone else who still has questions, as I mentioned, our public safety officials are going to stick around and be able to answer those questions. I also have copies of the presentation for anyone who's interested. And I just want to point out too, we do have our animal services team here as well, in case there are questions for them. And then one last thing, our Office of Emergency Management team is registering people or checking their registration outside at their table as well. So I encourage you to stop by. Thank you so much and have a good night.